Hey everybody, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. And this week we're going to take a look at yet another plugin. This is by the company Fuse Audio Labs. Now, Fuse Audio Labs is new to my radar. Actually, I was turned on to Fuse Audio Labs by a couple of my students over at mixingmadeeasy.net. If you want to learn about that, links will be in the description box below. Some of my students use some Fuse Audio Labs stuff and say, hey, Dave, you really ought to check these out. This would be really, really cool. So I reached out to Fuse Audio Labs, and in full disclosure, I asked them if I could try out their plugins and do some video reviews for them if I like them. And in exchange, they are been gracious enough to not only give me the plugins for my collection at no charge, which is very nice of them, and also to donate some additional licenses that I can give away as part of our monthly mixing contest over at mixingmadeeasy.net. So you want to click the links in the description box below so you can find out how you can possibly win some of their plugins. But as I always tell you guys, and I tell the companies that I work with from time to time on some of these plugin reviews, is that I am free to say whatever I like. I am not dictated to by the company on what I can and can't say about a plugin. If I don't like it, you won't ever see a video of it because I'm not going to come on here and just bash a company's product. I don't do that. But if I do think it's cool, something a little different or special, especially with these analog style plugins here, I want to turn you on to them because it's something that you may want to go demo and check out. And the other thing I will say about all their plugins is that they are very reasonably priced. I think most of them are under $100 US dollars. You could click the link in the description box below and go to Fuse Audio Labs. So anyway, that's what's going on here. So this is the first plugin that we're going to take a look at. This is the VPRE-31A. This is a preamp plugin, which I really like. Again, it sounds different than anything else that I've kind of shown you guys before, or different in the way it sounds compared to anything else that I have in my tool collection, which is my plugin collection, which is why I like this. This is based on an emulation of a 1950s RCA BAB1A hardware unit, okay? And this is a Germanium transistor section. So we have a input and output transformer that's been modeled here. And the way this is kind of designed to work is you kind of put this in the front of all your individual tracks here, is like maybe the first insert to emulate the preamp section, which is really, really cool. Adds a lot of subtle color and vibe to the tracks, and we will listen to that in a second. So let's walk through the layout of the plugin here and let's see what we have. Now, right now, I'll get it just to get out of the way so I don't forget to say it. We have 24 instances of this across the entire mix here, and the CPU usage is very, very light. So if I look at my CPU with all of these here, our performance monitor, I'm only running at 11%. Now, I do have a high-powered iMac Pro with an 8-core processor and 64 gigs of RAM. So if you have a computer with less specs than that, you may see a little bit more CPU taxing. But again, even if you just have a modestly spec'd out computer, you should be fine putting this across all of your tracks. So that's good, because that's the way it's really intended to be used, I feel, to get the most out of it. So from a CPU performance, we're fine. If we look at the layout of the GUI, it's very, very simple. Now, the first thing I wanted to point out to you is down here on the bottom left-hand corner, you can resize it. Okay, this is at 125%, and you can go all the way down to something as small as 80%, depending on if you're working on a laptop or whatever you're working on. I love when plugin companies do this. More and more companies are going to this now, and I really like it. It's great depending on the real estate and the screen size and how far away you're sitting from the screen, and how good your eyes are. So I like it at its biggest size here. So we have that. And we also can change the quality from high to low here if you have a CPU kind of issue, but again, I don't think you will. Okay, up here we have our gain knob. So the gain knob is pretty simple. You have from 0 to 40 dB of gain. Now the way this works is this is a compensated gain input. So meaning that the more you turn it up, it's going to compensate under the hood to turn down the output volume. So you don't have, when you crank this thing up, you don't have additional volume. Okay, where if you had an output knob, although we do have a trim control, I'll talk about that in a second. So they call this compensated. So all you're really doing is driving more signal into this thing, and the more signal that you drive into it, the more gain you put on, the more coloration, harmonic distortion, and all that good stuff we're going to demonstrate in a minute. But it's already compensated, so you don't have to worry about an output necessarily. Okay, so that's really cool. We have a phase invert over here. We have an impedance of 600 ohms and 150 ohms. And the way this kind of works is at 600 ohms, you are going to get more of a full frequency response to this. So in other words, and we'll demonstrate this, you're going to have more of the low end coming as you're pushing up the gain, it's going to affect more of the low end frequencies than if you are at 150 ohms. It's going to be more of the upper mids and higher frequencies. Okay, so so for example, on things like maybe electric guitars and stuff, where typically you would do a high pass filter anyway, maybe you would use this at 150 ohms. Where something like a kick drum or bass guitar, you might use it 600 ohms, but you would experiment with it, and I'll demonstrate the differences. Now we do have a trim control here, and now, like I said, the gain is compensated. But depending on how you set this impedance switch and how hard you actually hit this, especially when you set it to 150 ohms, it may appear that it's a touch bit louder, so you can always compensate with the trim as well. I guess you can you double click in there? I don't know if we get it exactly at 0. Close enough. Okay, that's the left-hand side. Then we have our VU meter here. Now, if you click on the VU meter, you can look at the input signal, you can look at the post drive after the gain, or you can look at the output level. Okay, so that's how you do that, just by left-clicking on that. You can choose it. We have a noise control here, which is going to add hiss and, all that noise floor. We have a power on and off, or you can just click the LED beneath it, and that will turn it on and off. Okay, then down at the bottom here, we have this little link button. Now, what this is going to do is, let's say you have, we have 24 of these. If you click the link button, what it's going to do is it'll link, well, there's two ways to use this. So let's see, this is on the kick track. Let me bring up the one on the snare, or just so you can see what happens here. So if I click the link button on this one, and if I click it on this one, two separate ones, now when I change the controls on one, it changes the controls on the other, but it's only on the two that I clicked on, okay? Now, if I unclick this, if I hold the shift key while I do this and click, now the way I understand it, and we'll check, is it links all the instances that are on throughout the entire session. Let's check that. So I have our kick and our snare up here. If I bring up our lead vocal, it will be linked as well. And if I turn, let's say, the gain knob on one, it'll turn them on all three. Okay, so that's holding. The shift key will link all the instances in the session. Just clicking on them individually without the shift key, that is going to just link together the ones that you've individually clicked on. Now, the way I typically use something like a preamp, because it's really program dependent on the track that goes in, I would typically not link them all together. I would typically adjust them individually, personally, but you can play around with that and see how you want to do it. And in Studio One anyway, I know this is good for linking them all together if you want to do a quick A/B test, turn them all on, turn them on all off across your entire session. But in most DAWs, and especially in Studio One, they have a master insert here thing, so you could turn them on all on and off that way as well. So it depends on how you want to use it. And that is really it. That's all that's really to this thing. It's a simple thing. It's a subtle thing. But the way this thing really has more power is an accumulative effect thing. So to me, it's designed really to be put across all your tracks. And that's what I've done here. So we're going to listen to these on a couple of individual sources so you can get a feel for what it does. And now I've very quickly just dialed it in across all the tracks. We'll play back the entire mix. We'll turn them all on and off so you could hear what it does. And then you could decide if you want to go out and demo it at fuseaudiolabs.com. And again, links will be in the description box below. So let's listen to our inside kick mic here. Okay, and I'll turn it up a little more than... Now, keep in mind, this session's completely unmixed. There's nothing done to it except that I just imported the tracks, quickly did a static mix, and I went ahead and threw this plugin as the first insert. There's nothing else on this. It's a completely raw session, and that's how I like to do these demonstrations. So you really just hear the effect of this plugin and this plugin alone, and not all the other processing that would come after it. You know what I mean? So that's, just keep that in mind. So we start with the gain down. That's the extreme. So it adds a little bit of nice low ends. If you're listening to this on a good set of monitors or headphones, you'll hear that. Now if I go to 150 ohms, okay, you can hear how the low end goes away. And it distorts more of the upper frequencies. A little bit of hair. Where this focuses more on the lower energy. Now let's turn up the noise. Okay, you hear what that does. So that's extreme. You wouldn't want to do that. But if you want to kind of emulate the sound of the old analog records that have some hiss in it, it does. That's part of the charm of this stuff, that you may want to dial in a little bit of it. But remember, it's an accumulative effect thing, so you don't want to dial it in heavy on all the tracks because then it could get distracting. But I always like a little bit of noise. So that's our kick-in mic. Let's go to our kick-out mic. We'll mute the first one here just so we can hear the second one here. And let's dial it in and then see what happens when we put them together. That's like our sub mic. Now also keep in mind that as you push this on something like a kick-out mic, if you push it really hard and you get a lot of saturation, you're also going to lose a little bit of the attack of the kick because you're compressing it is what you're doing, and you're shaving off some of that transient. So that's why I think you have to do this more in a subtle way. Now let's bring back the other one. And we hear some tom bleed in there, that's no problem. Now let's bypass just these two plugins. Before. Okay. So what I hear is a thickening to the bottom end, to the low end of the kick. And then also it just kind of gets a little bit more glued or warmer. Has a little bit of tonality shift, which is great. That's what we want, but it's subtle. And again, on two individual tracks, it's not going to be as obvious. Let's listen to a snare. So here's our snare. So you notice as I turn that up, that's a good demonstration. As I turn down the gain, you hear more of the attack of the snare, more of the transient. As I turn it up, you shave it off. That's what I was talking about with the kick. Now where it's at 150 ohms. Come on, let's go back to where we hit the snare drum. So at 600 ohms, the snare has a little more meat to it. It's a little bit thinner, but a little bit more hairy, if you will, on the 150 ohms. So it really just depends on your taste. Turn up a little noise. It's before. After. Nice. Let's do the overhead. So we'll do kick, snare, overhead, then we'll jump to bass. So here's the overhead. So that we'll loop around here. Let's solo it up so you can hear that a little bit better. Overheads now. You can hear how it distorts there. May or may not be desirable depending on what you're working on. Okay, now let's bring back our kick snares. And let's turn them all off. That's before. After. Just gives a nice subtle coloration. And again, what I love about this and what I like about preamps plugins that are done well, and we've looked at other companies that do them well. Arteri is one of them. We've looked at some other ones that do them well, and then we've looked at others that don't do it so well. Go back and watch my Neve 1073 preamp shootout that I did a few months back, and you'll be able to know the difference. But what I love when they're done well, it's subtle. When they're way overhyped, that means to me, usually they don't sound as good. This is nice because it's subtle. It's not supposed to be like this, oh my goodness, what a difference, because that's not the way a real preamp, a hardware unit really reacts. It's subtle and it's an accumulative effect thing. So this is done really well. This doesn't sound anything like a 1073 or a 1084 or any of those kinds of preamps. This sounds completely different and unique. It's got a warm, more like an Abbey Road-esque type of a sound because it's from the 50s and 60s. That's that kind of a vibe. It's got that warm, thick, low end to it that's really subtle, that kind of just rounds things off in a very musical way. I really like that about this particular plugin. This is great. Let's listen to it on a bass DI now, just to do that. Let's get rid of all the mutes here and let's just listen to a bass DI. So 150 ohms, you're going to get more of that nasty, which would be good in a mix like this where I have a bass DI and a bass amp. So on the bass DI, I might use 150 ohms. On the bass amp, I might use a 600 ohm setting and just tweak them in together, and you get kind of that balance, that thickness, and that kind of nasty hair that you want sometimes to get it to cut. Before. Push it a little more. Let's try the bass amp. So now maybe on the bass amp, I'm going to go 600 ohms. Just thickens up the bottom end a little bit. Now bring them both. Turn down the DI a little. Let's turn both the basses off. That's before. And there's that little thickness I was talking about with that little bit of distortion on that. Now let's bring in the drums. We'll turn them all off. Really cool. Very musical. I love it. Okay, now what I've done here is I've put this across the entire mix. We're not going to go through every track in the spirit of keeping this video somewhat short, but I've put them on all the tracks, and basically I just quickly dialed in some gain. I'm not slamming anything. Some tracks I use 600 ohms, some tracks I use 150 ohms depending on the source, and I just wanted to get a quick feel for, on an entire mix, what does this thing sound like? So let's find out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them all off. Just keep your eyes on the power buttons. You can hear the hiss go away when I turn them off. So I'll start with them off and then I'll bring them in. Again, it's a quick static mix. Just listen to the effect of what the VPRE-31A is doing.
I'm reaching out for someone. I'm reaching out for you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm reaching out for someone. I'm reaching out for you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
So there you go. So even on like those tom hits, it really fills up those tom hits really nicely. So I think this is a winner. I think this is something you should definitely go check out. I like preamps because again, it's great to set a nice foundation and just kind of get things in a more solidified musical way before you start adding compression, EQ, and channel strips and all the other stuff that we do. Throw these across all the inserts, your first insert, dial in a little bit of preamp and a little bit of color, and it really goes a long way. And I think it's a simple plugin. It's inexpensive, and it'll be interesting to see as we look at maybe 4 or 5 of their other plugins of Fuse Audio Labs. You know, how do they compare to this? I think this is great because it's different. It's a different, it's not like for me, it's not a redundant, I have, 4 other companies that make something similar that sounds just like this. No, that's not it. Like I said, if you want like a 1073 preamp, there's a million. I mean, you saw if you watch my 1073 shootout, you would see that there's 10 companies that make those. There's not 10 companies that do this plugin. And that's what I like about it. So far, my first experience with Fuse Audio Labs, I like it. I think it's good. I think it's different. It's something that can add a uniqueness and sound to your mix, which is really cool about being in the digital world with all these plugins, is you can use these plugins in different combinations to make your signature sound as a mix engineer. And I think that's important. That in and of itself is worth having these kinds of tools in your toolbox. And if you can get them for less than $100, and I think as of the recording this video, this thing's like $50 or $60. I mean, it's worth every penny at that price for sure. So anyway, thank you so much for taking some time and checking out the Fuse Audio Labs VPRE-31A. I really do appreciate it. Again, links will be in the description box below so you can learn more about Fuse Audio Labs and mixingmadeeasy.net, where I'm going to be giving away some of these plugin licenses as part of the mixing contest that we have at mixingmadeeasy.net every single month. So go check that out. I want to also give you something else here for free. Especially if this is your first time here, welcome to the Home Recording Made Easy YouTube channel and homerecordingmadeeasy.com. I want to give you a free gift. Go on over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. I want to give you a free mixing course. It's right on the homepage. Click the orange button. No strings attached. No credit card needed. Put your email address in and you will get emailed the free mixing course so you can check out my courses, my teaching style, to see if it kind of resonates and it clicks with you. And if it does, and you want to check out some more of my training courses at homerecordingmadeeasy.com, I want to give you a 25% discount coupon code that you can use on any course that's on my website. The coupon code is YouTube25. YouTube25, it'll be in the description box. Put that in at checkout. If you decide to purchase one of the courses, it will instantly take 25% off. So until next week's video, I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com, mixingmadeeasy.net, and I will see you guys very soon. Take care.